All right. Hey, Amy. Hey, everybody out there. We are on to our recap and Q&A. We do recap and Q&As or live streams. We're live. We're always live. I guess unless you're watching the recording, then we're not live. But we are just we do recap Q&A live streams on the Tuesday, typically the Tuesday after our monthly webinars. And Amy, last Wednesday for our monthly webinar, we talked through managing your work with Keeper. So we'll do a accelerated but still good recap on that, and of course if there's any questions we can take them. So Amy, you can see my screen, right?
Yes, I can, Ben.
Okay, good. It's I don't think ever a bad thing for me to ask that before I assume you can see what I'm seeing. Real quick, and this has been in there for a week or two, and we talked about it last week, and it underpins a lot of what we talked about, but there is a new resource called Keeper Processes and Key Procedures. It's in the resource library. You can find it by just searching Keeper in the platform, which the search works pretty well, in my opinion. It's in the upper right corner. You can also go to the resource library and look for Keeper Processes, and I think we just call it Keep. I think it says Keeper Processes in there. Maybe it says the whole Keeper Processes and Key Procedures. Anyway, it's just a 5-page document. You can download it. Obviously, if you use Keeper, compare it to what you're doing now. If you don't use Keeper, you can get a little bit of an idea of how the DBA firm uses Keeper. And if you already use Keeper, you can also kind of compare it to what you have. So this is a good one to grab. Amy, I flipped things around a little bit. I just put best practices at the beginning. So the same information we talked about, albeit we'll do a little bit faster. But we'll just kind of start with the best practices and then back into looking at some of the things that we talked about. So I'll uh, I'll say one last thing, and then I'll turn it over to you for a minute here. But what does DBA use Keeper for?
So DBA is using Keeper for monthly and quarterly accounting closes. So there are other things that you can do in it. They continue to enhance it, but that is what we are using. It is a way to organize our work papers for our monthly close clients and our quarterly close clients.
Perfect. Makes perfect sense. And we'll look at some more things momentarily. So let's hit these best practices if we can, just starting there, and then we'll go back through and go in a little bit more into the detail. So when you say determine who's responsible to add clients, who at the firm do we see or typically is adding clients, and do we recommend?
So ideally here, you are designating somebody who has administrative rights, obviously, to Keeper. That's the only way that you can add clients. I'm not yet aware of if they've given different permission sets, but the reason why that's there as a best practice is if you let everybody add clients, then everybody sees all clients out there, which, okay, maybe that's not that big of a deal. The time it becomes a big deal is on a dashboard when you're just trying to see the work that you're responsible for, right? And so determining who's responsible to add clients, it is recommended that it is one of your administrative team members that can add them and get them set up properly out there, or that it is, like in our world, the CFO is responsible for getting those added. That way, not everyone has to filter every single client out every time.
Makes sense. And then you talked about what the firm uses Keeper for, but what's I think we all know what templates are certainly, but setting up the firm's template, we definitely recommend doing that.
So there are a lot of different template options that you can look at. It comes with a default one. Keeper's also really good. They'll help you like think through your template that you want to create, but it is good. Like you have a process that you're following currently inside of your firm, right? DBA had a process. And what we did is we sat down and we said, okay, this is what we're doing in SurePrep today in order to organize these work papers and have it readily available for the controller to review once the CSM is done. So what do we want that to look like in Keeper? Are there limitations on what we're doing in Keeper that we need to account for and how we set things up? And so that's how we got to, okay, let's create our own monthly template. We know every single client that gets added to Keeper is going to use the same template and start with the same starting point, which is ultimately all you're after as you're trying to design what does our monthly process look like? What does our quarterly process look like? Is let's make sure it's consistent and it doesn't fluctuate based on whoever set it up, which is what you have sometimes is you can tell who did the work because the way they've organized something is the way that they do it and it's different than somebody else. So getting to that streamlined approach there.
In the keeper processes document that we have in the resource library that I just showed, there is a table in that document that lists out all the closed tasks. So that is a really good thing if you just want to see what the firm is doing and kind of compare that to your list. So you can pull that document down and look through that table. So define how supporting documents are included. Amy, what do you mean there?
So you can upload documents to Keeper. And so that will actually they have a files area that you can organize your documents into. You also, depending on where you store documents inside of your firm, you could just link to where they're actually at in your main area. So what I mean by that is inside of DBA, we utilize OneDrive / SharePoint. I'm going to use those names interchangeably here, but that is where all documents live. That is our true location of everything for a client lives inside of OneDrive SharePoint. And so when we're utilizing Keeper, sure, the document's already over in OneDrive. We're using Keeper to help us organize and to create the checklist that we want everybody to go through for every single client. So there's consistency in what we're doing. And so for some documents, like Excel files, if you were to add them to Keeper, okay, so we upload them to Keeper, I'm going to use quotations with my fingers here, then that document it can't be modified. So we can't go into it and update calculations inside of that Excel file. We would have to download it out of Keeper, make the changes, make sure it got saved back over in OneDrive because that's our true location of where everything resides, and then re-upload it to Keeper. So because of that limitation, if we're doing any workable files, so in our world, Excel is a workable file. So because you cannot run a tape calculator inside of Keeper, that's how we're essentially creating a tape is an Excel file. We can see the calculations. Anybody looking at it can see how that number was figured. That would be shared as a link inside of Keeper. So you can just comment, paste the link, and then the controller, if they're coming through to review, they can click the link and it will take them out to the live file on SharePoint or OneDrive. So just deciding what that looks like. For PDFs, we'll just upload them into Keeper. Sure, they're in OneDrive, but that's easy enough. We're not modifying that PDF at all. And so it's easy to just click and view from within Keeper. So that's kind of a little bit of an elaboration on that, Ben.
Cool. And then two more, using Keeper's Chrome extension. So take it people have that installed in their browsers. Somebody asked during last week's webinar if there was an Edge extension. I went and looked. I couldn't find one. It doesn't look like they have one.
Yeah, it did not appear that they had an Edge function. I also, yeah, I mean, Edge functionality has probably come a long way, is really what it is. But so yes, the Chrome extension you can, if you're in the QBO client, you'll see the Keeper is like a purple branding color. You'll see a client info button that's purple inside of QBO so that you can quickly view Keeper information. So that's where it's convenient is a lot of the work for a client is done in the QBO file. And Keeper's nice because you can view QBO information inside of Keeper and you can make changes in Keeper and it will directly flow back to QBO. But if your team's anything like the DBA team, they're living in QBO throughout the month on that client, right? And then Keeper's like the check. Okay, what else? Did we miss anything when we were over in QBO working on things? So that's nice.
Makes sense. And then the last thing we had here, communicate what changes from your current process and what stays the same. So what do you mean here?
So this is just any like change management, I think is really what that's getting at, right? Whenever you're going to utilize something new, well, what does that mean? What is different than the way that it's being done today? And then what continues to be done the exact same way, right? Because at the end of the day, the team members doing the work, they just, what do I need to be doing and how am I doing it? And so, is there something new that I have to learn and tweak with what I currently do in order to do the new process or the enhanced process that we're using?
Got it. So best practices here with Keeper and then certainly change management overall. Um, you said this at the beginning. We'll kind of hit this for 2 seconds. What kind of work is being done in Keeper, monthly and quarterly closes? Pretty straightforward in terms of what we're using the system for. So we talked a little about it and we were giving some context here, Amy, last week in terms of, okay, how did the firm arrive at using Keeper? Can you summarize a little bit about just give us a little bit of context?
Yeah, so the reason for exploring Keeper and now continuing to use it was really just that we're constantly looking for ways to improve. And so SurePrep was what we just migrated off of. SurePrep we had been using for tax workflow and then realized that like, hey, we need help with our monthly accounting workflow. Um, you could go farther back and paper and documents everywhere. And even when it was digital documents and whatever platform we were in and on the network, on the network drive, inside a file cabinet, right? Like just everywhere. So because we had experience with SurePrep on the tax side, realized the benefit it provided there and used it on the accounting side as a way to organize. Well, similar like limitations existed, right? Team members were having a hard time getting documents uploaded. It was crashing on them. It was becoming a pain point for team in order to do their monthly work. Well, from a monthly work standpoint, you're in there a lot more frequently than if you were doing tax returns, right? Tax is annual. And so we had the team in there every single month and running into issues. And so we were just solving for that pain, which then had us explore Keeper because the majority of our clients are in QBO. We have a couple of QuickBooks Desktop clients, but the vast majority are in QBO, and Keeper integrates with QBO, and it created a nice organized checklist to go through, which kept the consistency across team members and clients. And so with that move, though, there were limitations. Everything has pros and cons. So SurePrep, fantastic with annotation capabilities, cross-referencing, tape calculators, all of that exceptional inside of SurePrep. Keeper is meh, meh. It's meh as it comes to like annotation capabilities or null because they don't exist. You can leave comments on tasks, but you cannot run tapes. You cannot cross-reference. Those are all things that I have shared with Keeper and currently working through with them on just what can we do to enhance some actual workflow inside of there. What that meant though is, and what you see on the slide is credit card reconciliations and payroll totals. In SurePrep, we'd run a tape, show our numbers, what showed up on this month's close for credit card reconciliations, right? To be able to tie out for next month. And for payroll totals, we'd run a tape. And so that needed to change and how we handled it. And that's where, okay, we have an Excel file. And the Excel file is going to live in that client's folder. And this is where we run our calculations and we can link to the calculations for it. So you just got to think through. Nothing's ever going to be perfect. And if we always hold out to try new things until it's perfect, then we'll wake up and we'll be doing the same thing we were doing 5 years ago when the rest of the world is 5,000 miles ahead of us. Uh,
All right. So then, Amy, we won't go through all of these in our time here because it's limited on our recap. But we talked about and listed out some cons and pros, which you got from the team, and those are shared inside of the resource library there with a recording of the session. You can pull down a PDF and read through these. Any one on this you'd like to highlight?
I think the one I just stated, right? The lack of annotation and calculator capabilities and probably cross-referencing. I'm all three of those together.
Okay. So, and then some pros.
The structured checklist and the ability to quickly review from within Keeper of QBO transactions. That has been hands down, the team really likes the ability to filter that and to help them with 1099 review. So the goal at DBA is every quarter to make sure that you are all set for 1099s, right? And if you do that every quarter this year, that means when you get to 1099 time, you really are only having to look at the last quarter and make sure whether any new vendors that we need W-9s for, what are our totals at, and so should be good.
Perfect. Okay, so then we went on and we looked at a few different, we did pop into the program a little bit last week, but we've got some good screenshots up here. So we started talking about the monthly close template, and you started talking a little bit about the general tasks, and then we got down to the account reconciliation. What do you want to say here?
So Cliff Notes version, you could add anything you want in that general task area, just decide whether it's helpful or not. If it's being tracked elsewhere, does it need to be tracked in multiple places? You see payroll and 1099s there, and sales tax, right? Those are also tracked in our project management solution, our practice management solution. We use Canopy. So they don't need to be there, but they can.
And what's the reason to have them there?
If that's helpful for the CSM, the team member that's in doing the monthly close, if they want to see it because it's a helpful reminder for them, they just need to know they have to mark it as done in two places because it has to be marked done in Canopy. Whether you mark it as done in here, it doesn't affect the close. Okay, general items don't affect the actual close from displaying as being closed.
Got it. Okay, so let's then look in a little bit more detail here. So this is our next screenshot. So I can see we've got the pre-close tasks expanded. I can see bank feeds, fixed asset report, obviously several other tasks listed in here. You've highlighted some of them. What's the reasoning for the highlighting?
The ones that are highlighted are the ones that a document is typically attached to. And so like a PDF, right? Like the fixed asset report. The PDF has been printed, the report's been printed to a PDF. You're going to attach it here. Well, anything with an attachment, if it lives in the account reconciliation section, so go back one slide, Ben.
Mm-hmm.
If it lives in that account reconciliation section, it will actually take whatever has been attached there and it will display it in the applicable financial statement, which makes it very nice from a review standpoint. So all of those are highlighted because realistically, those, the first time you set up a client, you need to set it up inside of the account reconciliation area and link to that account in order to be able to have those attachments display on the financial statements. And that was a fun discovery that we made as we started using this and realizing, oh, wow, that's way more convenient to have it show up as an attachment on the financial statement itself, like on that particular account, you can click and view it.
Got it. Okay, so back forward again through into the pre-close tasks. Anything else to say here?
No, just all those highlighted ones. Yep. I would move them. First setup.
Okay, and then now we have transaction review, DBA's month close reports, and final review. So we have all these tasks here.
The one thing here, and this applied for the previous two screens as well, but you can define who it is assigned to. And so you can set up roles inside of Keeper. And then once you add a client and you define who sits in that role, it'll automatically assign them. So, our CSMs have been responsible through all the way through the adjusting journal entries, and then the controllers are responsible for everything else.
So typically assigned in here, Amy, I'm either going to see the CSM or the controller.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. Anything else on this screen to highlight?
Mm-mm.
Okay. And then final review.
So final review, this is displaying what I was just mentioning. You can see we're looking at the balance sheet and we have like the escrow account and down. You'll notice, I'm pointing at my screen like all of you can see that I'm doing that. You'll notice that you have the document icon with the number 2 by it. So there's just 2 documents attached to it. If I were reviewing this, if I were a controller and I were reviewing it, I could click right on that icon. It would show me the 2 documents, and then I could click to view that document while I'm still on the balance sheet there and reviewing those numbers.
Okay. So then we moved on to looking at the dashboard in the system that, someone's going to be working from. They've got their clients. Probably, Amy, they're just looking at their clients potentially, but they've got their clients filtered down, or they're just looking at their clients in the system and working off and keeping track of where they are on things. So one of them's highlighted in red. Maybe it's an obvious question, but what does that one mean?
So that one is not yet closed, right? And you can see all the way to the far right, 84% done. So this dashboard makes it very nice to be able to see all of the clients in your care, right? Who are you responsible for working on and where are you at on them? Sure, you can see that in your practice management solution, right? The team could go into their Canopy dashboard and they could see everything that is still on their plate, but not at this level of detail. And so the other difference out here is you'll see some of the lines are green all the way across. I'm going to answer your question, Ben, before you even have to ask it. And some of them are green bubbles, but white across. The only difference between those two is the ones that are still white have general items that aren't done yet. But technically, the closed status is done because those general items like the 1099s, the sales tax, the payroll, they don't affect the close of it. Just changes the color.
Got it. Okay. Anything else on this dashboard screenshot before we go to the next one?
Now let's look at the next one.
Okay. So,
The ability to customize views is
yeah.
what this is displayed here. You could set company-wide views, right? If, we've set a standard that we want everyone to look at these specific columns, we can set that as a company view, or you can establish your own private views. So if I want to look at my dashboard a certain way, but I don't want it to affect anybody else, I could save my view as a private view. And then I know that I haven't saved over the company default one.
It's always nice to not have to worry about doing that.
Right, exactly.
Somebody else logs in later, they're like, where did it all go?
I don't know.
Well,
Keeper must have made a change. I don't
yeah,
know what Keeper did, but
the keeper did it. Okay. And then you're kind of blowing out into great detail all the different columns you could potentially show. Is that right?
yeah, there's a lot of options out there. Sometimes less is more. We have less on. But you want to look at different things based on the role that you sit in, you most certainly could. And then save it as a private view. If you didn't want to create another company view out there, because you saw on the other side, you can have multiple company views. So
Yeah, and so that is really, we're getting close to the end of our 30 minutes here, Amy. That's pretty much where we wrapped up the other day. We worked through and just talked about contacts, where the firm came from, using Keeper for monthly and quarterly closes, those checklists in the system. CSMs and controllers are able to work off of their dashboards, just see their clients, keep a real close eye, and obviously see track their progress, client by client by client, making sure that they get things done that they want to get done month in, month out. And then we looked at the dashboard and saw some customizations and how people can, adjust what they're looking at. And then in the middle, we talked a little bit about some pros and cons of the system. So that is really where we pretty much wrapped up the other day. Is there anything else you can think of? We definitely had a few questions. We had that edge extension question. Were there any other questions that we answered or anything else that you can think of?
Yeah, I'll add two things. One question that came up was what version of Keeper were we looking at when we were going through the session? And so we are on Keeper Premium, is the version that we're on. And then the other thing I wanted to add was just, the reason, I think I'm going to go back to the reason why we use Keeper. So again, you have a practice management solution and you're tracking the jobs that need to be done for your clients. And yes, you could break out an entire checklist of items that needs to happen in order to close the client's books. And I've seen people do it, right? You might have 20 tasks out there, and whether or not they get marked off, then that starts to fall off. And is that accurate now? What we're looking at, is it not? Why are all these jobs sitting out there as open? What Keeper is essentially the checklist that you really want to build inside of your practice management solution, but it integrates with QBO, which is where it wins for us, right? We've never built out that checklist inside of a practice management solution because we know that it won't work. People won't mark it off, right? It'll be good until you've been doing it for so long, and then you're like, I don't even need the checklist anymore. And so the fact that Keeper actually integrates with QBO and the team can go in and update if they missed something in QBO and they catch it in Keeper, they can update it in Keeper and it will sync over to QBO. So I just wanted to point that out, right? Like that's really helped us to standardize workflow for every monthly client and then every quarterly client. And we did bring in some QuickBooks Desktop as an unconnected client. So in that situation, it purely is just a checklist. It is not syncing back to QuickBooks Desktop to make any of those updates.
Does it integrate with QB Desktop?
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's only QBO and Xero are the two that it integrates with. So you can keep your other clients in there, just to have standardization to your workflow. You could also communicate with clients through Keeper, but you would only evaluate that if you weren't using a different communication tool with them, which you likely are.
Makes sense. Okay. Well, great recap, Amy. I think we hit just about everything. Can you think of anything else? I'll give you one last chance.
I think that's good.
All right. Well, that will bring us to our 30-minute mark and bring us to the end of our live stream. Our recap and Q&A is what we call them. Again, we do these the Tuesday after our monthly webinars just to do a quick recap on things, summarize things if folks didn't get a chance to attend the first time around or had questions or anything like that. So, Amy, I think we are good for now. So we're all set. So thanks everyone for being on, and we'll catch up with you soon.
Thank you, Ben.
Thanks, Amy. Bye, everybody.